Welcome to the next episode of the Austin Bar Association's Council of Firsts. I'm your host, Amanda Arriaga, Austin Bar President. This podcast is made possible by the Texas Bar Foundation. In today's episode, we talk to the first Latina to preside over the 53rd District Court. Judge María Cantú Hexsel has been involved with community service her entire career. Though she has been involved in legal organizations, she spent most of her time dedicated to helping children see their future without limits. She has been PTA president, on the board of Avance Austin, volunteered with the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and served on the board of the American Lung Association Central Texas region. Since I've met Judge Cantú Hexsel, I found her to be authentic, kind, and a true leader for the legal community. I'm thrilled to have with me Judge María Cantú Hexsel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Amanda.
I have some questions for you.
Hit me.
I want to start with the basic question. Why did you want to be a lawyer?
I think that I always had an interest in political science and government. In my home, my dad had served as a city councilman since I was like 4 years old. And so that sort of interest in the law was already there. But I think really why I decided to go to law school was to really challenge myself. I think I felt like I was at a point in college where there had to be something more. There was some additional challenge that I needed to face. And in fact, that was going to law school.
So you were a lawyer, and then you decided you needed another challenge, and you wanted to be a judge. What led you to want to do that?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, sort of the public service aspect was always something that I was really interested in. And I, after 24 years in the practice of law, being a civil litigator, and the challenges that come with that, I felt like there was more I could give. And again, like another challenge, a point of challenge for me. And I was thinking about sort of this last phase of my career, not that I'm anywhere near there yet, but, in terms of the next 10, 15 years. And I really wanted it to look different. And I knew that it would be hard. But I decided it was time for me to take on that challenge and do something that I really had always dreamt about.
Did it occur to you when you were running for this particular court that you would be the first Latina?
I don't know that I specifically sought out a bench where that would be the case. But in retrospect, the 53rd is really the first judicial district court for Travis County. There were other courts before 1890, I think 2 or 5, but they were either part of the Republic or, I think the state hadn't quite figured out how they were going to establish this court system. And more in retrospect, I feel now like, wow, what a significance it is to be, the first not the first female, but the first Latina in the 53rd.
Yeah, I didn't know that that part of the history. That really is amazing then. We've had Latinas. You were sworn in by Judge Naranjo, the first Latina elected in Travis County. But I didn't know that your particular bench had that history. That's really cool.
It's coming to full circle now because we are in the process of moving some of the portraits from the old HMS to the new CFCF facility. And so I really got to go back and study the 7, I think, portraits in the 53rd and visually kind of seeing the progression of where it was for, almost 100 years versus where it is now.
Mm-hmm. Good for you. That's great. Even if we only figured that out in retrospect, that is history to be celebrated. So you were a lawyer, you decided to run for judge, and I would think the most awkward part is running for judge and how to be authentic during your campaign. And I believe that you were that. So how did you accomplish that?
I think it took a little bit of calming myself down and moving aside whatever doubts. I knew that I had the experience. I had litigated and tried cases at really every level of our state court system. I'd worked on, countless administrative appeals or administrative hearings, and I knew I had the experience, and I just needed to sort of set aside the doubt and find it in myself to really try and connect with people. And when I started to do that, I found that that's really easy for me to do. And so although there were ups and downs and times of real, trial and tribulation, I think going back to my roots of loving to connect with people really helped. And then I was just refreshingly surprised at how much I could lean into who I was authentically to make those connections with people. And I think back on it with a lot of respect for the process and understanding of like how hard it is really to run for office and run for judicial office, I think, particularly. But I'm so pleased that I was able to push, the parts of me that I think are authentic and lean in a little bit to my culture, my identity, and my heritage as a positive, as a way to make that connection with people. So overall, I felt it easy to be my authentic self. Once I sort of got the process down, I was like, wait, I'm just really meeting people and talking with people and letting them know who I am. And that was really a good process, a positive process for me. And I hope for the voters too.
The other thing that might be awkward, I can see how being yourself and being authentic and meeting people is easy. The thing that might be hard is asking for money. Did you find that to be a challenge? Because I assume when you're running for office, not only do you have this fear, well, maybe you don't want to vote for me, but now there's a reality of a campaign that costs money. And so how did you navigate that?
With a lot of struggle. I maybe it's cultural, maybe it's, the dynamic within my own family and kind of where we come from. But asking for money for me was a very difficult thing. And really, but it's part of the process. So I had to sort of swallow it and do it. And I had so many people that helped me along the way understand that it's not necessarily money for me. It's money for outreach to voters about who I am and who they can have as a judge. It's at the end of the day, it's public service for the people. So I sort of had to get around this idea that it was for me. I wanted to serve. I wanted to be a judge for all of the people of Travis County. And so the money then has to go for, that's what it's going for. But it was hard. I mean, it's really hard. I think some candidates can do it pretty easily, and I really admire that. It was difficult for me, and something, but again, a challenge that I had to face and am the better for it.
And speaking of challenges, you became a judge right when COVID started, and you were sworn in at your house because it was still the time that we were pretty uncertain what was happening and how often we could see people. Masks were just starting to be a thing. What was it like to start your judicial career at the beginning of the pandemic?
I think for a lot of us, that period of time, the pandemic specifically, was very difficult. On the one hand, we were grateful to have time, in our homes with our family. But for those of us that are more people-oriented, it was very isolating. And again, this keeps coming up, but it was challenging because I was trying to translate my skill set into this virtual world. I was trying to get to know my staff in a very virtual way. And that was, a time that I had to sort of navigate relying on myself to do it. That being said, every single one of the judges, as well as my predecessor, were responsive to me, available to me, would take my phone calls, would answer my emails. And so I really got the sense, even from a distance, of the collaboration and the support that I was hoping was there. And in fact, it is. And so that's something I'm really grateful for. But, when it came time to come back, of course, I was still concerned about COVID. I guess I started coming back in to do jury trials in April of, I guess, what was 2022. And that had its challenges, but I was also glad to be back in person. It was, I think, like every other working mom, there was the question of how's the laundry going to get done? But I think that, the easing back in helped. And I'm really glad to be, back in person for the most part on a day-to-day basis now.
That first year, did you have any times where you are in the kitchen doing Zoom court and your kids are there doing school and Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, the good thing is I have such a supportive, husband and family. And so the office that my husband and I had previously had shared, he said, no, I'll work out in the dining room. You get the office so you can close the door. And he got me all set up. Luckily, he's very tech savvy. And my daughter, my youngest daughter at the time, made a couple of signs. And the red sign said, stop, court in session. And the green sign said, okay to come in. So I would use the little sign outside the door. But my older daughter was doing her freshman year in high school virtually. She's a dance major. Her bedroom is right up from the office. And so all of a sudden there's flamenco happening. And I was always paranoid, like, does anybody else hear this? My staff would be like, no, we can't hear anything. Don't worry. But I could hear the dancing happening above me, and had to sort of navigate those challenges of other things happening in the house,
It's great that they were so supportive. I think that some other families might have had to compete for who gets the private office.
Right.
So what a hard thing for your daughter to be a dance major in her room that first year.
Exactly.
I hope now she is free and leaping in the world.
Oh, yes. Lots of leaping. I think we just finished our 4th of 7 dance recitals this season. So we're halfway there to summer.
Great. So because of your kids, it sounds like you have focused a lot on community service issues that impact children. What were some that were the most impactful for you?
I grew up in a home and a family that very much prioritized kind of community service in every possible way, but mainly centered around education. My parents taught night school and helped kind of community members get their GED and learn English. And then when I went off, before I went to college, I was already working some summer camps with different high school kids that were first generation going to college or, in high school and going to college. And then even in Lubbock, when I was in law school, I found a literacy program and worked with some adults in teaching English, and just always found that very, very fulfilling. And so Avance Austin is that organization for me here because it takes the child and the parent and teaches the parent that they are the first teacher for their child. And I think the investment at that age and stage is just incredible as far as results later on in life. And so I think anything centered around education has always been sort of top priority for me. My parents were both public educators, and I just found throughout my legal life that just finding those organizations or projects that you feel passion about are very easy to do. Like it's just easy to spend time on something where you really can get behind the mission and help in whatever way you can. And for me, that's just always been around education-centered work. It's just the key that unlocks the future for so many people. And in the Avanza program, particularly, yes, we help in making sure that child is kindergarten ready when they graduate from the program. But more importantly, that parent decides to get their GED, decides to go back to school, maybe get an associate's degree, become a teacher or a nurse. And those stories just exemplify why the program works. And there's nothing, I think, more important in society than unlocking that potential for people. So it's Avanza and organizations like it that focus on the family and the ripple effect of that work are just always easy for me to get behind.
Welcome to the next episode of the Austin Bar Association's Council of Firsts. I'm your host, Amanda Arriaga, Austin Bar President. This podcast is made possible by the Texas Bar Foundation. In today's episode, we talk to an attorney who leads an organization advancing Latina lawyers. María Amelia Calaf is the founder of Cafecitos. María Amelia, or MAC, has been committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout her career. In 2022, she was named as a Diversity and Inclusion Champion by Texas Lawyer for her commitment to opening the door for women and minority lawyers. She's a member of the Latina Commission for the Hispanic National Bar Association. She served on the board of MAMAS, Mother Attorneys Mentoring Association, the litigation section of the Austin Bar Association, a steering committee member of the Texas Minority Council Program, and a steering committee member of the Austin Women's Fund. Since I've met Mac, I've been so impressed by all of the mentoring opportunities she provides and that she truly does open the door for female and minority lawyers. I'm thrilled to have with me today, María Amelia Calaf. Thank you for being with us. I also want to start out by saying, I heard you say recently, you go by María Amelia or Mac, but never María. And that sticks with me. I totally get it. My mom is a María Elvia who goes by Elvia. And I am an Amanda or Amanda, but never a Mandy. So I want the audience to know when I'm being informal and calling you Mac, that's why.
Yes, I grew up in Puerto Rico in a family where everybody is a Maria something or a something Maria. Mm-hmm. And so we all went by both names or by nicknames. And when I was growing up, I was always Maria Amelia. And then when I moved to the States, Maria Amelia was too much of a mouthful. And somebody had the brilliant, or noted, I remember, they were picking something up from the printer, and the printer, when I was working at PricewaterhouseCoopers, would have your initials first, and so that people would pick up things from the printer and would call out Mac. And then they started calling me that, and it stuck.
That's great. Yeah. So Mac, why did you want to be a lawyer?
I don't have a neat story about wanting to be a lawyer. I didn't grow up around lawyers. Most people in my family who had the opportunity to go to college or engineers or accountants. But I always felt a call to service and being able to help others. And so when I was in college and I was at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown, I really thought I was going to go into the Foreign Service and just be a diplomat. But as the time grew closer to take the exam and I've started talking to people about what that lifestyle was really like, it became less attractive to me. And candidly, I was also really terrified about the idea of doing the Foreign Service exam. So at that point, I had worked at a couple of law firms, just doing jobs as a college student. I was a receptionist at a tiny little law firm in downtown DC. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try law school. And I knew I wasn't going to go straight to law school, so I decided to take a paralegal job in New York City because I really, really, really wanted to work in New York. And I went to work in very white shoe law firm called Sullivan and Cromwell. And I worked there for about a year. And I really did not think I was going to go to law school after that, because at Sullivan and Cromwell, I work in the project finance department. And turns out that project finance was not what I thought it was going to be when I started. It was, in my view, and not, no. I'm sure it's very interesting to people who practice in that area, but it's really like financing bridges and mines abroad. That was most of the practice. And for me, it didn't look as exciting as I thought it was going to be. And so I sort of decided that maybe law school wasn't going to be it for me and that I would try something else. And so I went into management consulting. And I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And it was there that I actually confirmed that I did want to go to law school, indeed, because doing that work, I realized that I was really passionate about was not the business aspect, or was not really building a business, but more writing and speaking. And after a few years at PricewaterhouseCoopers, I found myself having been assigned to a pilot program, whereas, even though I was doing consulting, I was no longer doing like the actual consulting that I was hired to do, doing Excel spreadsheets and that type of work, but really was just writing white papers for various projects and doing speaking engagements and working with this various pilot projects. And so at that point, it was really clear to me that I did want to go to law school, but not practice but that the law school was where I wanted to do, just not be a transactional lawyer. And so when I went to law school, because I had taken already some time off, I was 4 years out of college when I went to law school, I had a very clear plan that I wanted to be a litigator. And that's really what I wanted to do as a practicing attorney.
So your family must have been so happy. Your family of accountants were so happy when you went away from being a diplomat to PricewaterhouseCoopers, and you're like, nah, I'm going to be a lawyer. And I want to be a litigator. I think that's great.
My family, it's interesting. We have one other lawyer. So on my dad's side alone, I have 17 cousins, and only one of them is a lawyer. She's now a teacher. She was a public defender for a while. So we're not a...
Equally difficult jobs.
Yes.
So you bounced all around the country. You studied in D.C. and Chicago, practiced in New York. How'd you make it to Austin?
My husband. We had, in 2012, we already had 2 kids. We were living in Manhattan. We had a baby and a toddler. And both my husband and I were working big law back then. And our lives were just unmanageable, kind of in all the ways that you can imagine, because we were living in Manhattan and we both had big law jobs. And so it was clear that the time had come for us to have a different lifestyle and try something else. And my husband was working for a firm that had they actually had an office already in Austin, but the office only had 2 people. And they were looking to grow it internally. So rather than do lateral hires, have people transfer to the Austin office. And so we came, and I remember it was during MLK weekend in 2012. And that was a very cold, snowy weekend in New York City. And it was glorious here in Austin. So we were like, oh my God, this is amazing. And Austin 10 years ago was very different. Also in terms of affordability. So we were like, oh, wow, this is going to be a big change in a positive way. So we loved it. But then we said, well, we came without our kids, and it was a vacation weekend. Is that the best way to make a decision? Let's go back. Let's go back to Austin and check it out as parents. So we came with our toddler. We came only with our oldest son, who was 2. He was 2.5, almost 3, I think, at the time. And we still loved it. And that's how we decided to move to Austin. We had no connection to Texas. We didn't know anybody. We just thought that it would be a better place to raise our family and that it would be, a good opportunity, that it would afford us both as lawyers good professional opportunities.
Well, in 10 years, you've done a lot for knowing nobody in Austin and then coming and establishing yourself. And one thing that you established here is the Austin branch of a group called Cafecitos. So Austin already has a Hispanic Bar Association, and it already has the Travis County Women Lawyers Association. Why is it important to have Cafecitos?
No, that's a great question. So Cafecitos actually started right after the pandemic in January. I think we had our first meeting January 2022. And it was something that I had been thinking about for a long time. The Cafecitos group in New York had been a really positive influence for me professionally. And the key distinction between that group and some of the other groups that you have mentioned, all of which are wonderful and which I support and I'm a member of, was that it was a very informal network, which more than affording the members an opportunity for networking or for getting CLE, it was an opportunity to create community and feel supported. It was an exclusive group of Latina women who were in a space that was safe enough for people to talk openly about concerns, failures, and issues that were not all achievement driven. And I'll explain that because this is really actually important to me. We're in a very achievement driven profession. And in the Cafecitos group, the two women that started in New York, and it was fairly large in New York, created this really safe space that when I was a baby attorney, so I may have been like 2 or 3 years out of law school, this woman stood up and said, I got a bad review. And I've been told I have 60 days to find another job. And I need help. And I just thought, oh my God, that's amazing. And what was even more incredible, so I was first amazed that anybody in a group of lawyers would stand up and to a room full of 40, 50 women share that, right? Like be that vulnerable. And then the most amazing thing was all of the people that approached her to help her. And then, a few months later, she reported she had a job and she was super happy. And it was thanks to the network that she had found that opportunity. And that really was what I was hoping to facilitate when I just started asking people, hey, do you know any Latinas we're going to try to recreate here in Austin? Was that, yes, I love that we have CLEs and, can create opportunities for learning and working together. But I really just wanted to be a group where people feel safe and can lift each other up and open doors for each other. And so if anybody ever has the need to stand up and say, hey, I need help, either because I need a different job or because I need, support working through a difficult issue with a client or a colleague, people can have those conversations. And so the group is unique in that it's intimate, it's intergenerational, and it's super informal.
Well, and you have very impressive people that have joined this group. Austin is lucky we now have a bunch of Latina judges, Gisela Triana, the first Latina justice on the Third Court of Appeals, Betty Bayi Torres. One thing I joked about with your Cafecitos group is of the people I'm interviewing, I have a lot of your members.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I have a lot of your members because as we're looking at diversity, Latina lawyers and judges does make sense as a group to feature. So from going from knowing 0 people in 2012 to 10 years later, you have an organization that has some of the most impressive lawyers that we have in Austin. Well done. Well done to you. You're sort of the example of if there's a will, there's a way.
I'll say there's a woman that I met through the Hispanic National Bar Association. She's in Miami, Nitza. And during COVID, we did a lot of networking via Zoom. I've never met this person. I've never met Nitza in person. And I told her about my idea of the Cafecitos, but I said, I really just know 3 other Latinas. And she said, well, that's a cafecito. That's how we started in Miami. You just if there's one more person, you have a cafecito group, and you just build it. And I thought, okay, my expectation was like, if 3 or 4 people show up, we're going to be good.